about cash dividends. Cash dividends are defined as distributions of earnings to stockholders. Okay? There are three types of, we're talking about cash dividends, but there are several types of dividends. There are three types of dividends. There are cash dividends, which we'll talk about first. There are stock dividends. And there are property dividends. We won't talk about property dividends today. Okay, so there are three types of dividends: cash dividends, stock dividends, and property dividends. Dividends are distributions of earnings to stockholders. Again, they can be in the form of cash, stock, or property. Specifically, we're going to talk about cash dividends, and cash dividends are distributions of cash to stockholders. Okay? So cash dividends specifically, we distribute cash to stockholders. So they are cash distributions. There are three important dates with regard to dividend distribution. Okay, so there are three important dates. Okay, three important dates as, with regard to dividend distribution. One is the date of declaration. Two is the date of record. 3 is the date of payment. Okay, so there are three important dates with regard to the payment of dividends. Date of declaration, date of record, and date of payment. The date of declaration is the date the board of directors decides to declare a cash distribution, a distribution. Okay? So there's a board of directors meeting, and at that board of directors meeting, there's a vote. And that vote is to declare dividends or not. So the board of directors has to vote in order to declare dividends. You do not have a right as a stockholder exclusively to get a dividend. Dividends are given only by a board of directors vote. Only by a board of directors vote. So that they vote, and usually dividends are distributed, the frequency, usually quarterly. Okay, so they vote quarterly. The date of record is the date that the shareholder, on that date, the shareholder who owns the stock receives the dividend. So, what we have is, okay, so on this date, whoever owns the stock receives the dividend. Now, why do I say that? Because stock changes hands very frequently. So we're buying and trading stock. So if the board of directors declares a dividend, we have to know who to pay it to. So we say that there's a date of record. When the dividends are declared, the board of directors says, we will pay a dividend to anyone who owns the stock on the date of record. That date of record is a specific date, and whoever owns the stock on that date will receive the dividend. The date of payment, as you might guess, is the date that the dividend is actually paid. So this is the date. The dividend is actually paid out. Okay, so there are 3 dates: date of declaration, date of record, date of payment. Date of declaration is the date the board of directors says, yes, let's declare a dividend. This happens quarterly. The date of record is the date that the board of directors decides that anyone who owns that stock on that date receives the dividend, and the date of payment is the date that the dividends are actually paid. There are journal entries associated with 2 out of 3 of these dates. Okay, and that's what you're going to be responsible for producing, are these journal entries. And what do they look like? Okay. So on the date of declaration, the board of directors establishes a liability for the firm to pay the dividend. They basically say, we owe our stockholders a certain amount of money. Okay? So on the date of declaration, the first journal entry, and this is in a sequence, these 3 happen in a sequence, would be to debit dividends. It could also be cash dividends. And we credit dividends payable. Let's say that the amount of dividends comes to, for example, this is a high dividend, it would never be $1, $1 per share, and there are 1,000 shares. Okay, just to make the example simple, we debit dividends 1,000 and we credit dividends payable 1,000. So now what the board of directors has done is they've established a liability. Dividends is not an expense. This is not an expense. It acts like an expense in that it reduces stockholders' equity. What it is it's a reduction to stockholders' equity. A reduction to retained earnings, rather. That's what I meant. And stockholders' equity. Okay, so they are at closing removed from retained earnings. Dividends payable, though, is a liability. So the firm now is bound by this vote, bound to pay this dividend. They can't say we're going to pay the dividend and then never pay it. Dividends are something what we call sticky. Dividends are sticky. A lot of research has shown that dividends are sticky, meaning that once a board of directors starts declaring dividends, they usually don't stop. Stopping is a signal. There's something called signaling theory in psychology. Anybody who's a psychology major might have heard of signaling theory. It's when somebody's behavior usually is a portent for something else that they're about to do. So most stockholders believe that if a dividend is stopped, the portent of what's to come is that the firm is doing badly in its earnings, that it doesn't have enough money to give out a dividend. So that's why we consider dividends sticky. So this has been established, this dividend. It's on the date of declaration that we have this journal entry. Now, let's go to the next date, the date of record. No entry occurs on the date of record. No entry occurs on the date of record. Date of record is merely a date that's been designated by the board of directors as the day that whoever owns that dividend is going to receive the dividend. We just need to get the list ready on that date as to who is going to get the dividend. Okay? So third is the journal entry for the date of payment. Okay, on the date of payment, just like with anything else you pay for, you're going to have a reduction to cash. And now that we don't have, we've paid the dividend, we no longer have a liability. So we're going to debit dividends payable, which is a reduction to a liability by debiting it. We reduce that, it's $1,000, and we are going to credit cash. Cash is reduced because we're paying it out. And this is on the date of payment. Just make sure you can designate between those. Okay, so dividends payable here is a reduction to a liability. And this is, of course, cash, which is a reduction to an asset. Okay, and that concludes our journal entries for the distribution of cash dividends. When we close dividends, this dividends account will be closed into retained earnings, and it will cause retained earnings to go down. Retained earnings is reduced by dividends. That's why it is not an expense. Okay.